Green, also known as GoHerping, recently did a video on leachianus geckos and why he thinks they're overrated. I have a leachianus gecko. I think he's awesome, so let's talk about it. The first thing I really love about these guys is their size. They are actually the world's largest species of gecko, which I think is really cool in and of itself. I mean, how many world's largest things are out there, and the fact you can own one, I think is really exciting. I also think their size that's really impressive without being overwhelming. Full grown, they tend to be the size of your forearm. Of course, this varies depending on the specific locale and how good of eaters they were as juveniles, but for the most part, I think they're the perfect size. I think if you want to show your friends, it'll definitely be something that's impressive and eye-catching, but it's not so big where you're going to need someone to spot you while you're handling them, or if you get a bite, it could be life-threatening. I also really like that with their size, you don't need a massive enclosure. These definitely aren't something that you're going to have to custom build something for. It's very easy to find suitable enclosures in pet stores. A lot of people say that leachianus geckos can be in an 18 by 18 by 24 for their entire lives. He's in an 18 by 18 by 24 now as a juvenile, and I'm going to be upgrading him to a 36 by 18 by 36, but I think you can go a little bit smaller and still be okay. These also aren't a super active species of geckos, which makes them a lot easier to house. They aren't like any large monitor species where they're very intelligent and they need a lot of room to run around. For the most part, they're pretty sedentary and they kind of just stay in one place. This makes them really amazing for handling, but at the enclosure, they might not be super exciting to watch. I think this is a payoff that you have to decide with any reptile that you're getting. Some of the prettiest display animals are terrible handlers. Like day geckos are diurnal and they look beautiful and they have all these cool colors and they're always exciting to watch. But if you want to have a day gecko just to hang out with you like he will, it's probably not going to work out very well. Another thing I really like about them is their temperament. Especially as juveniles, they tend to be really calm and easygoing. Even the ones that are very young don't tend to be as flighty and jumpy as species like crested geckos and gargoyle geckos. They just seem to be a lot more confident and even intelligent. I never really see him jump just to his doom. Whenever he jumps, he seems to have a goal in mind, and he's never jumping just to get away with something. He always has a plan. But with that, their temperament can actually change quite a bit as they become adults. Especially the GT locales can be very feisty and cage aggressive. So I think that can be very interesting if you want a reptile that's not just boring and the same temperament 24/7. However, even some of the meanest geckos and most cage aggressive geckos are super calm and easy to handle right when you take them out of the cage. It is a little bit of a gamble if you get a juvenile how they're going to be as an adult. Of course, regular handling and socialization might improve your chances, and getting specific locales, a lot of the smaller island locales just tend to be better for handling. So as long as you do your research on that, I think you can find the gecko with the perfect temperament that's interesting to you. And also, I just wanted to add, because Alex is huge on like loving terrestrial geckos more than arboreal, I think arboreal geckos are way cooler. For one, they actually hang on to you. Like, what leopard gecko can do this? So I really like that I'm just not holding like this inanimate object, that he can actually climb and he can actually hold on to me. Their nails really aren't that sharp. I'm not sure what the big deal is. I think that you guys should hold sugar gliders and then decide. And in regards to them jumping, they really don't jump that much. The main time he jumps is from his enclosure. And he can't really jump more than a couple inches. These are also one of the most vocal species of gecko. I think it's super interesting all the different vocalizations they can make. I haven't heard any firsthand because he's only a year old, but as they reach sexual maturity, they're going to start making different barking noises and different whistling noises, so I think that's really cool to come out of something like a gecko. Along with that, with their initial cost, even though they can be kind of expensive to buy, I think they're less expensive than people actually assume. If you want to go for a pure locale from a high color line or a granite line or a super well established one, it's going to cost quite a couple thousands. But if you're okay to get a mixed locale and who's a juvenile, you can find some in the $400 to $700 range, which again is super expensive for a reptile, but I don't think it's an unreasonable amount. It's cheaper than like any new smartphone, so I think it's up to you what amount you consider reasonable or unreasonable. Even though these guys are pretty expensive for their initial cost, their actual setup and maintenance is so easy and so cheap. Like I said, you can house them in an 18 by 18 by 24 for life. I would really recommend an 18 by 18 by 36, but a lot of people have success with 18 by 18 by 24s. You can find these for crested geckos pretty much in any pet store, and you can always do a tank conversion, like a 20-gallon or a 30-gallon conversion. So the enclosure is going to be very affordable, and the stuff you're stocking it will also be very affordable. They do love cork, so as long as you can get a bunch of cork in there for them to hide, they're going to be in great shape. You also have the option to do a live planted terrarium, which I think is really cool, and it's very easy to do for most tropical species. With leachianus geckos, you do have to do a little bit more research and find some hardier plants because these guys are very heavy bodied, and sometimes they just end up crushing plants so the plants don't do well. But they're not going to be a species like blue chunk skinks who are going to dig up bioactive enclosures, so you don't have to worry anything like that. So as long as you're choosing the appropriate plant species, for the most part, you're going to be okay. The cleaning is also really easy, especially if you do a bioactive. It's super easy to just have the cleanup crew take care of most of the mess. A lot of leachianus geckos are known for pooping on the glass and smearing it all over. I haven't had any issues with Gecko doing that personally, but even if that does happen, it's really easy to wipe down the glass. Their diet is one of the reasons I love them so much, because they can actually just eat crested gecko powder diet, and they don't need any live food. This is pretty controversial, but I like to go off of the breeders who've had multiple for for tens of years. So based on what a lot of them say, they really don't need insects to thrive. They're pretty lazy, especially of the New Caledonian geckos. They're a lot more lazy than even crested geckos or gargoyle geckos. So insects aren't a huge part of their diet. Some people do feed their breeding females pinky mice during the breeding season, or they just add insects to help supplement them, but it's really not necessary. With them just eating a powdered diet, it's super easy to prepare and it's also very affordable. I also think that they make great first reptiles because you don't have to worry too much with different heating and lighting setups. I know for me, when I was first getting into reptiles, I still am kind of first getting into reptiles, but when I was first researching reptiles, I found the care, especially the lighting and the heating, to be really overwhelming. I'm never used to putting heat lamps for my sugar gliders or my rabbits, so I didn't really know how to approach that. And leachianus geckos, like pretty much all New Caledonia geckos, do really good at room temperature, so that's really good. You can add a UVB light or a different LED to help the plants grow, and I think UVB would be very beneficial, but a lot of people keep them without UVB and don't have any issues. You also don't have to worry too much about their diet since they do eat the specially formulated crested gecko diets. There are some ones made tailored for leachianus geckos. The only ones I know of are from Leaping Leachies, and that's the lychee linguine and the lychee lasagna. But people seem to have really good success just keeping them on the crested gecko diet. And the good thing about using those powder diet is you don't have to worry about doing any of your own supplementing. Another thing that I really like about these guys is that they're not super common yet. I think it's something really special about owning something that not a lot of people have. I definitely wouldn't call these reptiles overrated. I will say that they are gaining a lot of popularity and they are on a lot of people's dream reptile list, but I would say that's all completely well deserved. Also, just a little fun fact, these guys can drop their tails like most geckos, but they're very hesitant to. It seems like crested geckos will pretty much throw their tail at anything, but leachianus geckos are very rarely drop their tails. Even while breeding, they don't drop their tails, and these guys are very aggressive breeders. The main ones I've seen with drop tails are ones that were imported from the wild. Even if they do drop their tail, they actually do regrow them, so it's not a huge deal. It pretty much looks identical to the tail that they have, except it doesn't have a pattern. But they're not super sensitive like crested geckos. You can definitely pull on their tail. You can hold them by it. They're not just going to throw it for no reason. And their tail is also partially prehensile, a lot more prehensile than a crested gecko's tail, so I think that's really cool. A lot of people argue that you can't really see them in their terrarium, but I really like the cryptic coloration. I think the different morphs of reptiles are really cool and interesting. I love seeing the super brightly colored ball pythons and the different corn snakes and even crested geckos. But for leachianus geckos, I think there's a special beauty about something looking exactly like it would in the wild. Of course, we do kind of have morphs because there's some different high color lines, and there's granite for the Pine Isle. And if you look at the different localities, I would kind of consider those to be like morphs. But I really like that all of these guys are pretty much the green mossy color. They also do change color during the day, and especially they change during the night to blend in better with their surroundings. Right now, he's kind of this pale green with a little bit of pink, but when he fires up at night, he's almost completely dark green, almost a black, and the pinks on him get really bright and red, so I think that's really cool. These guys are also really slow growing, which a lot of people don't like, but I really like that because if you're getting a new reptile, I think it gives you time to get accustomed to them, and it's not something where if you just buy a small enclosure, you're going to have to upgrade them in just a couple months. They're going to be about fine for about 3 years until they reach their adult breeding size. I really like leachianus geckos. I think they're great for anyone wanting to get a gecko species. I will say that they're not the most active or the most interesting display animal, but I think that's what makes them such great handlers. These guys are super easy and super laid back, and they're so easy to just put on your shoulder and walk around and do some chores with. They're not just going to jump off for the first thing that they see. They're very intelligent, and I think they're really cool, and I think you should really consider getting one. So that's my leachianus gecko. I love them so much. Let me know if you guys like leachianus geckos and if you guys think they're overrated. Let me know if you guys think that there's any species that are overrated. The only one I would say in reptiles is maybe ball pythons. I just don't understand why so many people are obsessed with them when they are such finicky eaters, and their care doesn't really seem to be that easy from an outside perspective. But besides that, I don't know. And thought I'd quickly show you what he looks like in his enclosure. So he will go onto the cork and he will change color to make himself match with the cork a little bit more, but I still feel like they're pretty visible. Some do tend to sleep in cork tubes where you hardly see them, but he always sleeps on that top cork piece, so I always see him and I think he looks beautiful. Just to show you guys what he looks like during most of the day when he's not trying to blend in the bright sun, he kind of just looks like this. He has these really pretty pinks, and he has some different mossy colors all around. This is how he pretty much looks in his enclosure. In the night, when it's dark, he gets a lot darker than this, but it's really hard to show. And I think there's some tips you can do to make them fire up more, which I haven't done. Like you can put them in a humidity box or have them out in the sun. I don't do any of that because he's just a pet, but yeah, these guys can get really dark and really beautiful. And I never really introduced him, but his name is Gecko. He's 1 year old and he's from Leaping Leachies, and he's a type C GT locale. I got him rehomed, so don't quote me on that, but that's what the guy said. Also, I'm like terrible at ending videos, so there's like 30 clips. This is the enclosure he's in. This is what he's going to get upgraded to. This is not a care video. I'm not qualified to make a care video. I've just had him a month, so I'm just regurgitating everything that I read when I was reading him. So a lot of these just aren't based on my own opinion. They're just what other people have said. Okay, thank you guys for watching. Bye!